Hi, this is Hiki with the Lost Samba podcast, and today we're not going to talk about an artist, we're not going to a place, we're going to concentrate on a song, a great song which can be considered a window into how the Brazilian musical industry was in the heyday of Brazilian music, in the golden era of Brazilian music, which for me is between the 1930s and the 1970s. The name of the song is Brasil Pandeiro. As you can guess, I'm going to play this song later. But before doing that, let's talk about the song. Just a parenthesis here. This is one of my favorite songs ever, and it opens what is for me the best record ever recorded in Brazil, called Acabou Chorare by the Novos Baianos. As is common knowledge, life for musicians is very hard. No matter what era they're born, no matter what country they're born, it's always a tough battle to get into the industry, to play your music and to be heard. In the 1930s, this was true, but it wasn't as bad as it is today. Why? Because you had new inventions coming out. We tend to think that nowadays with the technology everything is like revolutionized, but in the early 1900s, late 1800s, the technological revolutions were much bigger. You had electricity. Before you only had candle lights, and also in terms of music, you started to have records that people could listen to at home. You didn't have to have someone playing an instrument or singing in front of you. You had the radio, and cinema now also had sound. So it was a different world. It was a very revolutionary world. There were many novelties, and music gained a completely new scope, because now a person could record a song and be heard all over the world potentially, but for sure all over a country that shared the same culture. So this created a star system, right? So you had the big artists that everybody heard, and this before was impossible. You had famous artists, but they traveled from town to town. It was very expensive to see them, or they'd play for the courts in the case of Europe. But records, radio, and cinema, they changed everything for the musical industry. Selling records, appearing in films, being heard on the radio was very different to scrabbling to play in nightclubs, or in casinos even. Casinos were obviously better, but normally a musician was trying to play in a place full of drunken people, was mixed with cabaret girls. Must have been very difficult, right? Obviously for other musicians there was the option of the philharmonic or the symphonic orchestras. It was another avenue, but that wasn't as fun. So the music industry was very different before all these inventions, or before this technological revolution. This obviously was true for the entire world, not only for Brazil. In Brazil, in this army of hopefuls, we'll find our hero of this week, called Assis Valente. He was from Santa Amaro da Purificação, the same town where Caetano Veloso and his sister Maria Bethânia were born, but also it's famous for the Samba de Roda that comes from there. It's like a very strong place in terms of samba. Many people say that the samba comes from there. You can see our podcast about samba. We talk about Tia Ciata, who brought the samba to Rio de Janeiro virtually, and she was also from Santa Amaro da Purificação. He had already recorded some successes, some carnival successes, but he was mostly known for a song he recorded for the June festivities, which they follow the European tradition, then the European summer in the Brazilian winter, and it's another avenue for selling music. It's also you dance. It's an out of season carnival, much more localized. But anyway, he wrote a song for these festivities called Cai Cai Balão. The downside in this explosion of music and of the musical industry was that the contractual world was very fluid. Obviously, the recording companies were the main beneficiaries of all these novelties. They usually had their fingers in cinema, in radio, and in recording, although some were independent from each other, but they fed from each other. For the artists, they earned a lot of money when a song was released. It was a huge success, but soon after the novelty dried out, they went back to poverty. Obviously, this was Assis Valente's world. The high earning season was obviously the carnival, because now the carnival's also got a completely different dimension with records. So in the carnival, the record shops, they would play carnival songs for the whole 3 months of summer, and it sold a lot. And that was when people who wrote songs made their money. During the rest of the year, it was kind of quiet. People wrote romantic songs, people wrote more complex songs, but it didn't sell very well. It was feast or famine for most songwriters. When Carmen Miranda appeared, this opened a completely new scenario for Brazilian songwriters. Carmen Miranda comes from this universe of recording carnival songs, and she was a big hit in Brazil before she went to the United States. Her favorites got rich, like Dorival Caymmi. Assis Valente gave her 1 or 2 songs to record. He also must have made some good money, and everybody who played with her, who wrote for her, she made a point in only using Brazilian musicians. These people became like the big earners of Brazilian music. Another avenue for songwriters was writing what you call samba exaltação. These were sambas talking about how Brazilian was great, how the Brazilian nation was great, how good it was to be Brazilian. And this, one can't forget, Brazil was a fascist dictatorship, so the government promoted these songs as a propaganda of itself. These weren't the 60s or even the 50s or the 70s. Songwriters, they just wrote songs. They didn't think about their political engagement. It wasn't as politicized as music would become. They just wanted to make a living. They just wanted to write a song and hopefully sell it. The biggest samba exaltação, obviously, was what outside Brazil is known as Brazil. The song, Brasil, meu Brasil, brasileiro. In Brazil, it's known as Aquarela do Brasil. This was huge all over the world for several reasons, which we also explain in another podcast. And Assis Valente decided to do his own samba exaltação to rival with Brazil the Song from Ari Barroso. The product, right? Ari Barroso's song and Assis Valente's song, they kind of reflect their different personalities. Ari Barroso was more of an intellectual guy, so he wrote it on the piano. His public was more of the casino goers, the rich people. He sang with an operatic voice and was very classical and everything. So it was more for the upper middle class. Let's not forget that this was a fascist country, so the upper middle class didn't want to know much about the poor people. And Assis Valente was a people's guy. He came from Bahia. He frequented the sambas, and his sambas sounded like a street guy's samba. He was streetwise, differently to his rival, if you could say that. I don't know if they saw themselves as rivals. Brasil Pandeiro has more spice in it than Aquarela do Brasil, or Brazil the Song. And it was written for Carmen Miranda. Assis Valente's plan was to write a song that was as great as Aquarela do Brasil. Carmen Miranda would record it and he would become rich. This didn't happen. Carmen Miranda, when she heard the song, she thought it was slightly anti-American. It mentioned the words Uncle Sam, which is not very complimentary, and it also said that the Americans had a lot to learn with the Brazilian way of being. They would be more joyous if they adopted the Brazilian ways, and it says that now is a time for the Brazilians to show their value, but their value is music, pandeiro, samba. And Carmen Miranda thought that wouldn't be a good idea to present it in the United States. She refused to record it, and this was a big disappointment for our hero. It was such a disappointment that this accumulated with several other factors. He was full of debts. His kind of writing was gradually getting out of fashion. Several factors led him to commit suicide, unfortunately. The rejection of Carmen Miranda to his masterpiece obviously contributed to this tragic outcome of his life. Brasil Pandeiro was recorded by less significant group of musicians. They were called the Anjos do Inferno, the Angels of Hell. It was a huge success. It was carnival music, but it never reached the impact that Assis Valente expected for his creation. But it stood there. It stayed there. In the 50s, it was ignored by the Bossa Nova, because the Samba exaltações had become an uncomfortable memory of the times of a dictatorship, of fascism, and Getúlio Vargas had aligned himself in the beginning with the Nazis. So people didn't want to know about Samba exaltações during the 50s. In the 60s, music became very engaged, very political, but no one went there. Also, Brasil Pandeiro stayed ignored. I mean, Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, the whole Tropicália, Gal Costa, Maria Bethânia, they sang very traditional sambas, old sambas, but they never recorded Brasil Pandeiro, probably because of its foot in the Vargas dictatorship. Finally, in the 1970s, it was recorded by the psychedelic Novos Baianos.
Abre a porta e a janela, e ver o sol nascer. Abre a porta e a janela, e vem ver o sol nascer. Abre a porta e a janela, e vem ver o sol nascer. Abre a porta e a janela, e vem ver o sol nascer.
The Novos Baianos were literally a group of hippies. They all came down from Bahia. They lived in a flat, a penthouse flat in Botafogo, but they put tents. They lived in tents in a flat. Then they went to like this kind of farm in the outskirts of Rio, where they lived in a commune, and they all had like incredibly long hair, and they were completely out of the system. But amazingly, they were kind of mentored by João Gilberto, who must have been sent there by their recording company, but also did this out of, he wasn't a person to just be told to do things. He did this because he believed in them, and they were also from Bahia. He's Baiano too, and he decided to mentor their music. And he suggested that they, because it kind of was akin to their vibe, right? He suggested that they record Brasil Pandeiro, which they did, right? With so the harmonies of the song, they're you can see that they were done by João Gilberto, and the result was one of the best records and one of the best recordings Brazil has ever seen. It was a very, very good record. It makes their energy, that's libertarian energy, with João Gilberto's expertise, and both of them, João Gilberto and the Novos Baianos, very attached to Brazilian music. João Gilberto saw in them that they did Brazilian music and rock, and he saw, well, this is the new Brazil, and Brasil Pandeiro was a good match. With the new hippie bossa nova samba clothing, because when they played samba, it really sounded like samba. It wasn't like a bossa nova. That was like a delicate kind of samba for the middle class. Now, when the Novos Baianos did samba, it sounded like samba, but a psychedelic samba. So it really, the chemistry there was perfect, and the song received its due love. And in this new clothing, it showed what the song was really about. The song wasn't about nationalism. It was about the joy of being Brazilian, the joy of living in a multicolored society, a multicultural society too, close to like the not only nature. Brazil at the time was much more forested and was much more beautiful. Unfortunately, this is going, but living close to nature, not only the outside nature but the inside nature. Brazilians were very spontaneous. This is also kind of going, but and samba is about this. So it shows what Brazil can contribute to the world. It can be this successful mixture of races, this connection to nature, not only the outside nature but the inside nature. And this was what the Novos Baianos is about, and this is what La Samba is about. So I hope you enjoy the song. Chegou a hora dessa gente bronzeada mostrar seu valor. Eu fui a penha, fui pedir a padroeira para me ajudar. Salve o morro do Vintém, segura a saia que eu quero ver. Eu quero ver o tio Sam tocar pandeiro para o mundo sambar. O tio Sam está querendo conhecer a nossa batucada. Anda dizendo que o molho da baiana melhorou seu prato. Vai entrar no cuscuz, acarajé e abará. A Casa Branca já dançou a batucada de ioiô-iaiá. Brasil, esquentai vossos pandeiros, iluminai os terreiros que nós queremos sambar. Há quem sambe diferente noutra noutras terras, outra gente num batuque de matar. Oi, batucada reunir vossos valores, pastorinhas e cantores, expressão que não tem para o meu Brasil. Brasil, esquentai vossos pandeiros, iluminai os terreiros que nós queremos sambar. Oh, Brasil, esquentai vossos pandeiros, iluminai os terreiros que nós queremos sambar. Oh, samba, oh, samba, 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 oh, samba, oh, samba, 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 oh, samba. Chegou a hora dessa gente bronzeada mostrar seu valor. Eu fui à penha, fui pedir a padroeira para me ajudar. Salve o morro do Vintém, segura a saia que eu quero ver. Eu quero ver o tio Sam tocar pandeiro para o mundo sambar. O tio Sam está querendo conhecer a nossa batucada. Anda dizendo que o molho da baiana melhorou seu prato. Vai entrar no cuscuz, acarajé e abará. A Casa Branca já dançou a batucada de uiuiaiá. Brasil, esquentai vossos pandeiros, iluminai os terreiros que nós queremos sambar. Há quem sambe diferente noutras terras, outra gente num batuque de matar. Oi, batucada reunir vossos valores, pastorinhas e cantores, expressão que não tem para o meu Brasil. Brasil, esquentai vossos pandeiros, iluminai os terreiros que nós queremos sambar. Oh, Brasil, esquentai vossos pandeiros, iluminai os terreiros que nós queremos sambar. Oh, oh, samba, oh, oh, samba, oh, oh, samba, oh, oh, samba, e sambo, sambo, samba, oh, oh, samba, sambo, sambo, samba, oh, oh, samba. As a quote to this song, I will say that this is, when I was growing up, this was one of the songs that I most played to my friends and at school and wherever I went. I was lucky enough to have a guitar teacher, and this is one of the first songs that he taught me, and I really wanted to learn it. So it followed me throughout my life. I played in several places. I lived in France for a while, I played that. I lived in Scotland for a while, I played that. And it's been following me for a long time. And this is, for me, a very special song and very dear to me. I hope you liked today's podcast. It was a bit fast because I'm going on holiday next week. There won't be a podcast. I'm going to send out a short film that I did. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you a good week. Até mais.